What's up YouTube, it's Brandon from Tattooing 101, and today what we're going to talk about is how to make stencils if you're using it by hand, and also how to make stencils for more realistic designs. I'm going to show you these few things and a few tricks that I've picked up being a tattoo artist over the past 13 years. As always, if you're new to this channel, make sure you're liking and subscribing down below so you can keep up to date on all the new tattooing content we make each week. Now let's get into how to make an actual stencil.
Okay, so this is how you make a stencil for a tattoo design. These are the two I printed out. This one's for more realism. This is like a neo-traditional, something like that. So with this one, what you're going to need is two different sizes of pens. So I like to use a really thick 1.6 millimeter. It's a big pen for like all my thick lines, and I'll go through with like a 0.7 or something like that for my thinner lines, and that way it'll have different line weights in the actual stencil, which helps out a ton when it comes to tattooing and knowing what size needle you need for each different design. And obviously with the more realistic one, we're going to be doing it with the smaller pen as well. It's going to help out, be able to clearly see where everything needs to go, and I'm going to show you exactly how I do this right now. So when I'm doing neo-traditional and doing it by hand, you could use one of these spirit sheets quite a few times before, you know, it kind of runs out and you have to throw it away. With realism, I make sure that I use a clean one every single time. So we're going to start here. One thing I like to do is wear gloves just because this stuff gets everywhere and it can be super messy, so I'm going to put gloves on to do this stencil. Now, of course, you don't have to do this. I just do it because, like I said, once it gets on you, it's on you all week. Then if you touch your face, you have a blue face for the rest of the week, and then, you know, everyone else in the shop makes fun of you because they have been there, done that, and that's just what tattoo artists do. Awesome. So I'm going to show you exactly how I do this. So we're going to go through here and do lines for all the areas that we know is going to be like shading, but really nice shading up to a point, almost like if you were doing realism, if you were doing neo-traditional or something like that, you would do a line, but with this it's going to be shading, but you want to make sure it's crisp. So we're going to do a perfect line for areas like that. In the eyelashes we're going to do perfect lines, and then for everything else we're going to be doing dots, little dots and little dashes for different areas to know exactly where the shading needs to be. So let's get into this. So we're going to start out down here, and for realism you want to make sure that you are doing everything perfectly. Every little line is going to affect the design as a whole. So going through any angles that you need to go in order to make sure it's 100% correct will make your life a whole lot easier later on. And obviously this area is really nice and dark, so I'm not going to do a hard line right there because it's going to be more shading and lines for the actual eyelashes, things like that. Okay, so right here, this is going to be a blacked in area, so we're going to make our line right there. Block in this area and add the lines for the actual eyelashes right here. We'll go around the actual eyeball. And you can see now that this is why it's so important to get a really clean picture, because you would not be able to do this if everything was fuzzy. You just have no idea where everything's supposed to go. So going through here, we'll do the eyelashes now. So we're going to go through, mark every place there's an eyelash. And when I do this design, I'm going to be using, you know, a couple different sizes. For realism, I like to use, you know, I'll even pull out a liner for eyelashes and things like that. I'll use like a type 3 or just a really tiny liner and just go in there and do those areas. So just keep that in mind when you're making your stencil. You want to make sure that you're doing everything exactly where it needs to go so it looks exactly like the picture. It's also really important if you're first starting out with realism and just getting used to it, try to stay away from doing photos of, you know, actual people. Doing things like this is going to help you out, because if you throw off one eyelash or, you know, throw off the way the eye looks, it's still going to look like an eye, right? So you could get away with doing these things and it still looks okay. When you're doing someone's actual face, it needs to be 100% exactly like it, especially if it's a family member or something like that. So yeah, I recommend just practicing on, you know, things like this, getting used to it on fake skins, and then progressing throughout your career. So we pretty much have all our hard lines down there for the actual stencil. I'm going to add this one right here to the top. So we're going to go through here and add our dashes. So there's going to be a shading mark right here. Obviously the shading comes up, and we're just going to block out where all of the shading needs to be. Up here there's a part that's darker, and this is the lighter area right here. So doing all of our dots right here, it gets dark, and we're just mapping out all of the tones. So when we make our stencil, we know exactly where everything needs to go, but we're also going to be having our actual print off, so we also have that to look at. But this is just a very rough reference of where we want all our shading to go with the actual tattoo. So I really take my time with this. You know, I want to make sure that everything is in there, because if you try to do it and try to just guess where everything needs to go when you're doing the actual tattoo, it's just going to be a mess. You're going to get frustrated. It's going to be way harder to be able to do it. And with realism, it's already something hard to begin with to learn. So you want to set up yourself, you know, for a win instead of setting yourself up for failure. So taking the time and just practice doing these. That way, whenever you do build up the confidence to do the actual tattoo, you know, you've already done stencils for them so many times that you pretty much know where everything is going to go. That'll help out as well. The biggest thing when it comes to realism is drawing. You know, don't necessarily try to draw realism right from a picture. All you have to do is print off the picture that you want to do, just trace it, and then do the shading, because you're not going to be, you know, trying to draw a perfect portrait. That's not what a tattoo artist does. What we do when it comes to realism is take a design and shade it in appropriately. You know, you're going to be pulling a design off like this. I'm not drawing this. I've printed this off exactly how it needs to be, and I'm just stenciling it from this. So do the same when you're practicing. You know, print off a design, trace it with a light table or trace it on your iPad, and then just work on the shading with, like, you know, your pencils and things like that, getting the appropriate shades everywhere it needs to be. And that's what's going to help you learn realism, instead of just trying to sit there and be able to draw from a picture. Okay, I'm going to do a line right here, because this is going to be the darkest area underneath right here. And also some shading right up here. So just going through and getting all this stuff mapped out. Then when you're done with it, this is what it's going to look like. You know, all the shading's in there exactly where I need it to go. When I put this stencil on the skin, this is what you're going to see, obviously in reverse, because this is the back of it. So this is what you're going to follow for the actual design. I do this with every single realism tattoo I do. It helps me out a ton. It's worked out a lot for me. You know, some people use the actual printouts to where they have this design print out in different shades of like different dots and things like that. That works really well for some people. That's just not necessarily what I like to do. This is what I like to do when it comes to realism, because that way I already pretty much went through and, you know, traced over it and did the shading once. So when I jump onto the tattoo, I pretty much did it once, so I know where everything needs to go. And I recommend that you do that as well. If there's people out there that do it the other way, that's totally cool. This is just my personal preference on how I do it. Okay, now we're going to get on to the neo-traditional design I have. I'm going to go through here, do the flower first with my thick pen. One question I have for you guys: how pumped are you to see how to tattoo realism? I know a couple people have been commenting about it. I want to see how many people out there are waiting for that video to come out. So comment down below, you know, just saying I am, or whatever you want to say, or any questions that you have, and I will get back with you guys. So for neo-traditional design, we're going to go over, and a couple things I like to keep in mind would be, make sure you are following your stencil. With, you know, roses and things like that, you could really get away with, you know, doing a little different. Like if I went off this line a little bit, it's not super detrimental. It's not going to destroy the whole design as a whole. But with like daggers and things like that, you want to make sure that you are using a ruler to actually do them. Now with this design, I'm probably just going to do the rose just to keep the time down, so you're not sitting here for an hour watching me stencil a ton of designs. I'm just giving you a couple tricks on it and how I do it in this video. So we're going to go through here. All of the bold lines we're going to be going over with our thick pen. Right like that. And we're going to keep the inside of these leaves right here for our smaller pen. So just going over the big lines with this one to start out with. Right like that. Practicing stencils is a great thing to do whenever you are first starting out. I can remember as an apprentice I've done this so many times that when I started doing it, it was just second nature. So now we're working with our smaller pen. I really like to use two different colors when it comes to my thicks and my thins, so I can clearly see on the stencil what I'm going over. If you use the same, like a black and a black, it could be kind of hard to differentiate whenever you are doing them, so I like to change it up a little bit. Now we're just going through and doing all our little lines for the design. And you know, some people asked me on the other video I made if you are actually able to do a stencil with printer paper. And the answer to that question is absolutely. You know, just like I just showed you when it comes to realism, that's how I do it. I print off the paper and just go exactly how it was on that actual printout to do all of the lines and make the stencils that way. So for the neo-traditional, this is how it is done. This is how I make all my stencils with two different size pens in order so I can differentiate between the two on the actual stencil. So I hope this was able to help you guys out learning how to make a stencil and how to make a realistic stencil with Spirit stencil paper. Now, one thing I want to point out would be I highly recommend the Spirit brand. The other brands you get on Amazon, they don't stay as long, and especially when it comes to Realism, you want something that's going to stay really well. So highly recommend Spirit brand. I get it directly through them or a tattooing company, so you know it's their actual brand and not a knockoff. And as always, if this was able to help you out and you haven't yet, make sure you like and subscribe down below so you can keep up to date on all the new videos we come out with each week. And also, you can be notified whenever we come out with a Realism tattoo. If you hit that little bell notification, it'll notify you, so you can definitely be up to date. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.